Okay, welcome to InBank. This used to be actually office space of one of companies that we started in 2021. We sold it this year to Swedbank. Now the room is free and we have converted it into this ballroom, and now we can actually host some external events in the office as well. So welcome. Also, there was a funny thing that happened when I was preparing slides. After I created those slides, then I double-checked the schedule once again, and it was still saying that I have 1 hour and 35 minutes. And then I was like, no, it's like too much. I will probably just go for 60 minutes. It will be enough. But then I still decided to double-check, hey, how much is it? Like, will 1 hour be okay? Or maybe 45 minutes? And then they told me, thank you, that it's 25 minutes actually. So, just in case you were worrying that you will have to stay here for a really, really long time, not really the case. So I need to figure out something because I have 60 slides, and so probably like going at double speed or skipping some slides. Let's see. Also, I will be paying attention very carefully to how sleepy you are, and based on that, we'll be choosing the pace. Anyway, there are different preferences. Like, people come to conferences. Some like to talk, listen talks about just principles. No mentions about the companies or the background of presenters. And I personally actually like to hear real stories about real companies, real insights from inside. So I decided to actually try to actually match best of both worlds. Talk about principles, and just a caveat, principles, they are not right or wrong, or like right principle can be used in a wrong place and so on. But these are just principles that we have been using or will be using or will continue using in InBank. But I will also try to bind them into a real life story, and let's see how it goes on a double speed. Anyway, we will be talking about starting a bank. Also before that, so that I know the audience, how many people work in a company that has less than 10 people? Okay, quite few. So good luck. And how many people in a company that has less than 50 people? Okay, it's logical that there is some overlap. Okay, more than 100 people. Okay, actually quite big companies. More than 200 people. All right, more than 500. Okay, it's the same hands. Okay. More than 1,000? Okay, you guys are big. Anyway, talking about starting a bank, right? It's probably quite a terrible idea. Has anyone ever started a bank or like participated in creating a bank from scratch? Okay, one brave. Okay, let's see. Anyway, good news is that it's not 100% terrible idea. Bad news is, statistically speaking, it's about 90% terrible idea these days. But yet it keeps happening. And roughly 55 times a year in the past decade or so. So people are still attempting. So let's take a look at the market. What's the market like? First of all, there are about between, like, no one knows exact number, but it's between 10,000 and 12,000 commercial banks globally out there. And there are like certain parameters that describe them on the average. So they usually are profitable. This is how regulation works. And this is the most like traditional strategy, but they grow really slowly. There are some like types of KPIs that usually are used to describe banks. It's like how quickly your assets are growing. So usually for those incumbent old type of banks, it's like less than 5% growth a year. Then there is like net income growth, and then there is return on equity. And then there are a few other parameters, but wanted to keep the slides not too heavy. Okay, and then there is a term which you probably have heard, actually not a very big thing in Estonia, but in the rest of the world, it is a thing, but basically since 2010-ish, about 500 neobanks or so-called challenger banks have been created. And the difference between these two terms is neobank usually means a completely online digital bank that you can only access in your app. And then challenger bank usually means that it is primarily focused on being in the form of app, but also might have some physical branches. And then, like, if we compare the old school banks and these new types of players, then the first thing that we see is a really different growth space. So usually it's like assets are growing more than 30% a year. It's a very significant difference. So clearly they are choosing growth over the profitability. So on the average, they have negative net income and negative return on equity because only 1 in 20 neobanks or challenger banks is actually profitable. So statistically, it's a totally loss-making type of business. Tough. And then there is in-bank. So it's a story of in-bank. So, and basically my statement, like why I like the company is somehow it's kind of a bank, but not really a bank, but it has basically best of both worlds. So if you look at the growth, then it definitely like falls into this category of challenger banks, like growing pretty quickly. So the stats for like past years has been like more than 30% year-on-year asset growth, and also it has been in the past 5 years generating in a stable fashion more than 10 million of annual net profit. So somehow it actually did work out, and this company was started in Estonia, operates right now in 5 markets. Basically, let's take a look into it. And the first kind of principle that I would like to point out is, as a newbie, like you decide to create the bank, you can actually make some choices and you can choose your game mode. And it's actually better if you choose it wisely. So what I mean here, so if we are looking at those new school types of banks, then they all seem to be focusing on extreme user friendliness compared to those old school banks, young people, and payments. Because maybe like it's easier entry barrier from the functionality point of view. However, still like a capital heavy type of business. And here the difficulty of economically viable product growth is the nightmare one. And usually in this package, the problems are that you have a really high customer acquisition cost, you have really high regulatory expenses, you have chosen those like 3 categories that you kind of focus on and bet on, which are really like a low margin type of product lines. So your core is low margin. Usually they start with free users type of model. So at some point you need to monetize them. This is difficulty. And as a new player, you have challenges with credibility and actually keeping the customers. So it now sort of is starting to explain why 19 out of 20 neo and challenger banks that have been created in the past 10 years are all unprofitable. And actually very interesting, fintech, financial, who works in fintech, by the way? Okay. Don't know what is the situation with you, but in the McKinsey report that I read in spring, the numbers are a little bit better, but there actually something like 80% of fintechs worldwide are loss-making currently. But fintech boom is also a relatively new thing, so it also like actually emerged in the past 10 years. So let's give this industry some time. So, but now like to summarize the principle is when you are choosing this game mode, then you can actually choose like banking. Banks offer like different functionalities, so you can choose yourself maybe the higher margin core from the day one, and maybe the principle could be that You want to be profitable right away from the inception as early as possible, and then you would like to be obsessed with reinvesting all the profit and revenue into growth. And then it's actually much easier to raise capital out there in the capital markets. Maybe in 2021 and 2020, it wasn't that big of a problem. These days, actually, capital availability is a challenge. But if you are profitable and you are growing, then the cost of the capital becomes actually much, much better for you. And for some companies, it just becomes available. Okay, but if we talk about the evolution of the financial technology, then everything started with, we call them home banks, kodupank. So those like generic all-purpose banks, they used to do hundreds of different things, and they used to be pretty mediocre in everything that they do. But that was actually the model, to try to offer as much as possible and basically keep and hold the customer as strongly as possible, never let her go. So again, like when it comes to integration of like those banks into different spheres of life, they were not designed for it. And basically they were forcing the customer into quite heavy relationship. Okay, and then in 2010 plus, and actually like in some places around the world already earlier, we had this emergence of fintechs. Usually what it meant, the first step is that you take a look at the home bank and you choose one thing that you would like to do really, really well. And you focus on this one thing. And the only constraint that you have is actually scalability, because usually home banks were operating in one country and focused on one country. Even if it's an international bank, if you look inside, it's actually a group of completely distinct and independent banks that just happen to be part of the same group and carry the same logo. So now fintechs actually, instead of like playing in one region, had to do it globally. And I think it was actually a huge improvement for consumers. I think about my previous company, Wise, definitely made some things 10 times better than they were with traditional banks. For example, 10 times cheaper or 5 times faster. And in all other industries as well. So you can take investments, and neobanks are actually like solving the user friendliness and convenience of payments things. But the issue here is that now maybe like in 2010, when we got our first smartphones, it was actually a really nice idea that I can have different apps, and we were excited about every new app that we could install. Now it's actually becoming cumbersome, and now we have 500 apps in our phone, and we need to navigate between them. So it's actually becoming not so pleasant. So how we see things is that the next kind of evolutionary wave and phase of fintech technology is what we call embedded finance platform and embedded servicing as well. And here the idea is that you take this service or functionality out of a traditional bank, and instead of packaging it as a separate standalone solution that you can market as a standalone product, you actually build it in a way that it could be embedded in a streamlined fashion, in an elegant fashion, into any other product that already exists in the market. And this is what we try to do. So here's a story about like a tech company approach to doing the bank. And in our case, maybe like if you imagine like a bank like Swedbank or LHV, bank accounts, payments, cards, balances, it turned out that we actually don't have any of that. But we are actually competing for the same set of customers. How does it work? So let's start with the playground that we have. And let's take just like our first region was Estonia. This is where the company started during the previous big crisis in 2010. So for us product people, the universal goal building our products is always creating the value, and then finding a way how to actually commercialize it, and then hopefully earn some revenue and profit and then reinvest it in order to create even more value. And then the cycle goes on. And then you are basically choosing some industry, and then one of the options is joining the existing ball game and becoming really good in it. So this is the way of being the competitor. Here is you, this pixel, and you are just getting started. Okay, let's inflate the ego a little bit. You are actually bigger. But what we are trying to do is then coming to those existing players in the market. So if you are using like banking example, 2010, probably the whole market, all customers are divided between 3 to 5 major banks in a small country. And by the way, in our country, it's like we have really few banks. In some countries, there are thousands of them. So the landscapes are different. But the principle is always the same. You come and you start squeezing in, basically trying to capture those customers. And then you push with your elbows. But actually, squeezing in is quite hard. It's expensive. It's inefficient. It's slow. So there are probably some other approaches, and sometimes they work if you are creative about them. And this is what I call the non-competitor allies approach. Because here, like we have so many people, 50 people, dealing with different things, building completely different products of different industries. But really, if we are operating in the same region, then we are all actually competing for the attention of exactly same customer base. We are just trying to do it in our own game. So there are like separate pools of competition. But the amount of customers in some region is still finite. It's the population and applicable population cohorts that could use your product. And there are hundreds of different industries, thousands of different companies, but still same set of users. And it all coexists in this region quite in a nice harmony. And now if you look at this landscape and try to ignore all players in your ball game, in your industry, your competition basically, then anyone that doesn't compete with you could actually be your ally if you find a way how to turn it into a reality. So the idea and the principle here was that instead of competing alone yourself in your industry, which is bank, foreign bank, what if you could find thousands of players in other industries and kind of make them compete on your behalf and increase your market share? As a mentally stimulating exercise probably can be applied in different areas, but some technology is needed for that. And then we came up with this concept of the embeddable bank. So how does it work? So what we internally kind of like to say is that we are attempting successfully to build the technology that moves banking out of banks. So the challenge is to basically build a technological solution that can let any commercial B2C business enter the space of retail financing banking services. So as I come from the payments background myself, there is this relationship, the sacred relationship between the merchant and consumer. We all consume something. And sometimes actually bank is needed. Actually, in quite a lot of cases, population around the Western world is actually really used to use credit and financing in their consumeristic behavior. But it used to be like a really heavy process. So kind of earlier, back in the days, and actually in most of the world still today, especially like in Western Europe, where actually financial services are not that developed, it's a pretty heavy process. So merchant basically needs to tell the customer, hey, yes, I understand that you need financing, but you need to go to your bank, figure out how you do it, maybe credit card, maybe something else, take a loan, come back with the money, then we can do the transaction. So the paradigm shift that we actually envision is what if it would be possible to actually build that particular consumer financing functionality into any merchant, into any area, into any commercial platform, into any service or flow that any type of other business could have, and basically make them a mini bank. And everyone seems to be winning in this picture so far, because if the game plan is to grow a network of thousands of merchants where such solution is embedded, then the merchant wins because they grow their GMV. This is one of our key North Star KPIs. We measure how much additional new value we are creating for those merchants which are part of the network. And merchant is happy to develop this new revenue stream. And this is actually very important, is because it's obviously if some old value chain is being redesigned into something, then someone new becomes the beneficiary. And in this case, it's us as the kind of technology and servicing provider and the merchant who now is actually acting as a mini bank. From the regulatory and compliance point of view, we take care of all the complicated stuff. And obviously, it's a revenue share model. So now merchant starts to earn of it. And actually, this traditional bank is becoming a little bit disintermediated. And it is happening in one of the highest margin business domains. So now what about the customer? A customer actually gets the streamlined instant financing flow. They don't need to go anywhere. So it's a huge convenience boost that probably comes at a little bit of extra price. However, I think what the founding team probably didn't exactly imagine is how much impact it can have on merchants. And it turned out that for some players, it can be a really game-changing product. For example, who has used Auto24 in Estonia to buy a car? Few people. But actually, most of the transactions in Estonia are happening through that platform. So it's the kind of market-leading platform for car ads. And for that business, when it was acquired a few years ago, it turned out that for them, the boost in profit was about 25%. So imagine adding a piece of technology into existing profitable business, but actually having that big of an impact that there is a 25% boost in the company value. So this is huge. And of course, the bigger the player, there are different compensation schemes that we develop for them. But the idea is definitely offer the alternative and actually move the value from the traditional bank actually towards the merchant that actually does the kind of awesome thing. They offer some goods or services, and the customers are loyal to them and love them. So they deserve to get the bounty. One of the principles that I really like is being B2B first company, even if you are actually not B2B. Maybe you are B2C, but you can still develop any company as B2B. And what I talk about is I have those some of my favorite examples where some companies that we know really well actually started as a B2B type of company that was built inside something else. For example, there was a gaming company which was called Tiny Spec. They were doing RPG type of strategic games. And in order to kind of build a superior tool for internal teams to communicate and collaborate between each other, they didn't want to use Skype. They started creating their own tool, which was called Slack. And now Slack is actually much, much bigger than the original company. But it kind of technologically, it was built right away in a very reasonable and smart way. So it was actually disintegrated from the original business. Then in biography book of Jeff Bezos, there is really nice chapter about the creation of AWS. And they had this principle that the business consists of atoms. And atom can be a technical bit, or it can be some process. And basically they were building those atoms in a way that they could be actually taken out of the company and developed into separate revenue streams. And now, if you look at the annual report of Amazon, then 16% of the revenue comes through AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. So basically, they built the infrastructure as a B2B business inside of the existing company. And then there are other examples. So I've been involved in something similar, for example, in Wise, where we created the Wise platform. There I was dealing with engineering. So anyway, I believe that it is really healthy and beneficial for any type of business from the technological standpoint, because it gives you some really, really awesome optionality in future to export your technology. If you manage to create a technology that can create a lot of value, then maybe it makes sense to not keep it as a proprietary thing, keep it only to yourself, but rather give it out to the rest of the world as a standalone thing and develop a nice revenue stream of it. And I think that business people and product people it's not always intuitive to us. It's actually more intuitive to engineers, because this is how tech frameworks usually work. So you don't if you are a good engineer, you don't develop it for one and very narrow business use case. So you try to do the abstraction, and then we have a lot of worldwide well-known tech frameworks which actually grew out of some existing known businesses. So businesses usually and new business lines are not often built as modular software libraries, but they could be. And usually it's the strong product and technology companies that prove that it is possible. So I recommend this principle to everyone when the time is right. So probably if you are a early days startup, it's not the right time. But when you are becoming a scale up and you also anyway need to be developing a technology layer that scales and scales a lot, then this type of philosophy to system design can become really, really valuable sometime in future. And for us, I'm promoting this thinking that we are developing those standalone independent engines that are like Lego blocks, and out of those Lego blocks, you can put together what we call product lines. Okay, now I feel that I probably need to speed up. But the principle here is, again, originally the idea was that we create a technology that lets other businesses do something out there. But here, we need to be consistent with the principle, and actually we can be also one of those external businesses, so we can be the B2B customer of our own business. And then it means that we are also dog fooding our technology, understanding what it's like to be in the shoes of the external party that is dealing with your tech. So someone might be coming and building a channel with your tech, but also since we had the tech, then we started building our own channels, which was a very logical step. So we created the deposits product, the direct loans product, so we created our own channel as well. But we don't compete with merchants, so we leave their business to them. We are not entering the retail industry. Okay, then usually when we have new joiners into a company, then I'm doing this presentation and I'm using this platform cake analogy. Don't try to actually zoom in, it doesn't make sense, but very quickly just running through it, focus on colors. So here, this is where basically the technology and maybe business design meets. So we have this blue part, which is what we call core engine. So this is market agnostic, reusable in any market. Then we have the green part, which we call market enabler. This basically localizes the core engine to different markets in which we operate, which for us today is 5 markets. And then there is something that we call channel enabler. This is the interface against the external world. So it can be the API, it can be the portals for end merchants that use our system. It is the different portals for customers. It can be the mobile app. It can be the engine that creates those different sales and checkout flows. So anyway, like different representations of a collection of these blue and green building blocks in the bottom. And then on top, we have the vertical enabler. When we put all these things together, then it turns into something that is like very narrowly focused to solve some problem in the real world. And there can be our own things and kind of different verticals for which we have kind of shaped the combination of red, green, and blue. And in the bottom, there is the company's treasury and balance sheet. For a bank, it's a serious place. This is where the money lands and where the money goes out as well. Okay, double speed, let's move forward. But anyway, every layer has its own specific purpose and own unique mini mission within the overall company's strategy. All right, so to visualize this, now in addition to merchants, we started creating some of our own bubbles where we are a B2B customer of our own technology and kind of going out there, operating in the market, but not competing against the merchant. And hopefully the consumer is happy. Talking about consumer, and the end is actually near. I mean, for the presentation. So our principle is that price is not the product pillar. I came into Inbank from a low margin business where we had kind of this really strong mission that price should be as low as possible. And it was, in the beginning, quite difficult for me to adjust. I always wanted to reduce prices. However, then I started to realize that actually some of the companies that I love, for example, Apple, they have exactly the opposite strategy. They actually try to charge as much as possible and compensate it with something. So it's a reasonable and profitable business principle if you actually nail it. And now I got used to it, and it's actually okay. So we believe that if there is some other technology-driven product pillar that creates enough value, then the market would be keen to actually pay the premium for it. And I think it's not a bad principle when it works out. Okay, too heavy slide, probably can skip. But it's actually a really good one. Maybe next time. So talking about product pillars, for us, we have chosen that they are speed, convenience, reach, and credibility. Speed is actually the most obvious. So if we imagine the old school approach where merchants couldn't actually offer financing in a streamlined way, then the process for the end customer was really, really slow. So today, the merchants that integrate Inbank into their processes, 99% of well, let's call them loan applications or like financing applications, get instant answer in 75% of cases. So basically, immediately, you go through the application form, you immediately get the result because of our completely different underwriting approach compared to traditional banks. And in 99% of cases, it is faster than 5 minutes. So, pretty quick. But there are also like other bits like the convenience of basically the flows that could be built with us and other conversion related things. Okay, North Stars. Basically, product people, you all know how it works. You have those basically product detractions and promotions. They can be measured in your product pillars. Then because they can be measured, you have metrics in place. And then this metric points to one North Star. Sometimes it is actually not one. There are businesses that have multiple of them. Sometimes, especially if you are not in B2C. If you are in B2B2C, then it's a multi-dimensional thing. You can have multiple. But yes, for us, basically, we want to create the value for merchants that use our tech. So this financed GMV is what we use to measure it. Then we can understand how much incremental value we have created for the merchant. In order to have some different numbers which are not related to money, we, for example, could be looking at the number of contracts. And also, as we have the sidecar, which is a bank with more than 1 billion balance sheet. Then we also have those typical bank KPIs as well. These help us to understand whether what we do is economically and from the regulatory point of view viable. Okay, and now we have this picture where merchant seems to be happy, consumer maybe is not always happy about the price, but is very happy about very quick process and convenience. And we are also quite happy, actually. Things have been going all right. And now, like if you look at those markets where we have been operating, then in the retail financing, we are either very close to being the market leader or already are. So it's definitely like not very convenient thing from the traditional banks standpoint of view, because the market share by players like us, so maybe like InBank has paved the way in this paradigm shift. Now there are many other players as well that actually try to do the same pretty successfully. So the market share in this very profitable segment has been actually dropping for traditional banks. So here is one of the last principles is to try to stay in we are just getting started mode forever. It doesn't matter how mature your company is. Maybe it's your first day, then you are getting started. Maybe you have existed for 10 years, 15 years. I'm quite sure that it will be beneficial if you move your horizon and you increase and you resize your ambition by order of magnitude at time. So basically you keep increasing your goal and finding basically the niche and trajectory, how you could make your thing much bigger. And to conclude this, if everything that we have built ourselves or together with merchants actually is just a demo. So it's like a demo that has costed us several tens of millions to build. It has brought in revenue worth of hundreds of millions, but it's just a demonstration. It's actually like not really the business. And I think this is the right way to look at it as a tech company that is in a scale-up phase. So what we see as our future is that if we like move towards the path where we can actually export the technology and team up with other financial institutions, then it's a much more like reasonable thing to do, because so far our strength is technology and servicing. Our weakness as Estonian little bank that has not been like raising tons of money is capital. So, and basically you look at this kind of system and you understand that the more capital you put into it, the more comes out, because the model is proven, merchants are happy, the value is created, and we don't have much capital. So it would be actually more reasonable to make a shift in the business design and approach it in a different way. So now the next big thing for us is actually focusing on developing the proposition for large financial institutions. I wish I could tell something, but I can't. But we've been like really working hard on this, and the direction is very clear. Hopefully at some point we can like share some news, but not yet, because also our bonds are publicly traded. So if anything awesome happens, we anyway need to notify the stock exchange first. But as you understand, we are now trying to actually make everyone happy in this whole picture, create the value there in the middle, and make the world a little bit better. All right, so end credits is basically repeating the same subjective principles that I went over. So choosing the product game mode wisely. Then instead of making calculated choice of doing something which is hardly profitable and very difficult, actually choosing something where the margins are high and try to be profitable from the early days on, reinvesting all the revenue that you generate, using this profitability and growth to attract more funding to reinvest into more growth, If possible, and that's actually possible, avoiding the stress of competing and maybe actually take a different path and choose the joy of teaming up with someone else, with some other businesses. So this different approach to designing the business model. Building your technology B2B first, even if you are B2C, you don't need to do it from day one. You can eventually get there. And using the technological opportunities to create such value that market would be keen to pay the premium, so higher profits. And staying in the we are just getting started mode forever, as long as you can, always elevating the horizon. And resizing your ambition by order of magnitude at time. Thank you for your attention.
It's time for questions. I'm sure
so the title of the slide was like why fight for a slice when you can create a whole market, a new market. Can you talk a bit more about that? Okay, I know that you are creating a completely new segment in Estonia. But can you talk a bit more about that? What would you do if you were starting right now?
I see where it's going. You know, like it's very easy to like be on the stage and sound smart when something has worked out, and you have like a very clear example on mind, and you can talk about the principles that led to like making those choices, and like later it's very easy to say that yeah it works. But I think the idea is about principles. Probably like if you call out some industry and some like new startup idea, I don't know, like probably it could take like a day, week, year, or 5 years to come up with the alternative. It might even not exist in some other like areas, but I think it's the mind frame, like how you try to solve some business issue, and kind of unless you are making some complete product and technological breakthrough, most businesses out there actually do something that already exists and try to do it better in one or another way, and basically use it as a selling point and attract customers. Then in that case, instead of like direct competition, you can try to think out of the box and approach it from a completely different angle. And I think like in fintech, we are seeing this traditional bank, financial technology company that does one thing, and like the next evolutionary step is kind of embeddable functionality that used to be either a functionality of a bank or a fintech. So I think the idea comes from this new approach to designing businesses, and I'm quite sure that probably it is possible not only in financial sector. I'm quite sure that it's applicable in different use cases in healthcare, in education, and so on and so on and so on.
So you mentioned that now that you've created this new market, new approach, you have some followers, well, that somebody was trying to copy you, sometimes quite successfully as well. So how do you think about that competition? Like usually these followers don't have to deal with educating the market and I don't know, changing regulations and stuff like that, and it's easier, way easier for them. So like, are you concerned about them? Do you even think about them, or it's just you do your own thing and don't even pay attention?
Yeah, well, actually, around the same time, there was exactly the same company created by Max Levchin in US, which is called Affirm. So, and it's not like your competition. You just see that someone is actually building the same model in other like corners of the world. But in general, like in regards to competition, I think nothing can be as inspiring and sobering as some good and awesome competition. I think like we have some awesome, great, similarly like designed companies that have been created in the past 5 years in Estonia. I think it's cool to see what kind of like twists and ideas they come up with, what kind of like fair and unfair techniques they are using. I think it makes the game very interesting. But what makes me sleep better at night is living by this principle that you try to move the horizon to the next level all the time and come up with something completely new. Like, for example, exporting your technology for us is a very different direction, but at the same time we see that the stuff that works well inside of our engines, especially on a multi-country and cross-border level, it's not really solved out there, and it's also like so specific. So most likely it's a B2B, it's a solid B2B use case. So if you keep doing that, then it will be difficult for competition to keep up with you. But if you stop where you are and basically become comfortable with this situation and are not actively trying to come up with some new and next direction, then the competition will eventually, most likely, statistically, chase you successfully, and well, you might lose market share, you might die.
Is this positive note? One more question, yeah.
Yes, thanks a lot for talking about applicated topic in a fun way. And what mentioned verticals, embedded files are the most popular nowadays, and what the verticals have this untapped potential.
One thing that I didn't talk about, actually, like in terms of merchant verticals, actually everything works well. We have seen that car sales work really, really well. PSP approach works really, really well because PSPs need to offer checkout, different payment methods. If they can just with in like 1 week integrate our rails and offer, and the way how our system works is that there are thousands of parameters that you can actually configure, so you can create your own like unique flavor of financing product. So the optionalities are like really, really wide. But basically, it's actually like everything from cars to healthcare to consumer electronics and so on. But one of the newest things that we have created and that has been actually growing about 500% per year on an annualized rate is a rental of consumer electronics, because we had all the pieces in place. We have the partner portal, we have engine for building flows, we have customer identification, risk scoring, payment collection. So all the pieces were in place, but we just found a new use case for the same technology. And now if you go to, I think probably any Apple store in Estonia, and they offer you to rent the device instead of purchasing it, and rent is about 30% cheaper, but the device is not yours. That is the caveat. But if you change your device every 2 or 3 years, then this product makes sense. So this has been actually like growing really well. This is one of fresh discoveries.
Let's take one last question.
Based on what made the decision to expand some new market or stay to grow the existing markets?
Well, we are product-led sales organization. So in every single country, we actually have separate, relatively independent country team that is focused on basically doing sales in that country, establishing new deals, understanding very well the market, and finding basically new opportunities before someone else does. So each country anyway has their own roadmap, and this is what we expect of them. So basically, at least on a quarterly basis, every country elaborate very clearly, hey, what is the biggest opportunity in your market? What is the opportunity size? How complex is that challenge? And then if you are convincing, then you might be prioritized. But basically numbers do the work. So we actually try to improve things in all existing markets all the time. But since establishing a bank is a very capital heavy and in general like very heavy endeavor, then I think we are quite close to basically deciding that we don't want to expand to new markets in the greenfield type of approach anymore, because we have done it in 5 markets. It is quite complicated. So now we are like thinking about productizing the technology for large financial institutions and rather doing it together with someone else. I think it makes much more sense.
Okay, thank you very much, Erik, for your speech.
Okay.